grieved. And I thought of her a lot, and I thought of my part in it. Why hadn't I told my father? And that became almost like a sort of a cancer, if you like, in my heart, because if I'd have told him, she might still be alive. It never entered my head that she might just have died at home, and it was just an inevitable thing that was going to happen. So I never really grieved. In fact, I never really grieved for decades. And then a very strange thing happened. I've always been an animal person. In my formative years, we'd always had cats. And then I got a dog. I got a beautiful, beautiful dog. Somebody couldn't keep it where I worked because they were having to move into a small house. It was a Doberman cross, so it needed space, and I had 5 acres for it to run in, and this dog was my best friend. And we had such a relationship. I mean, he never barked, he just listened. Unconditional love. It was the first time I'd had unconditional love in my life, and that dog knew everything. He was my best friend. I was in a difficult marriage. So, I don't know, the dog sort of became my best friend. That's all I can, that's how, the only way I can say it. I used to walk for miles with him. When he died, it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through in my life. And it appears that the grieving that had never been done when I was younger bottled itself up. I grieved from my mother. I grieved for my grandmother, who I found dead in our house. She'd just gone to sleep, so it was not a traumatic thing. I grieved for my father. And it washed over me. All these people who had been key people in my life were no longer there. I wonder what would have happened if I'd have had counselling or grief counselling when I was a child. How much different my life would have been. Because I always felt that I was being somehow held back. In fact, I was probably holding myself back. But it's interesting to think that without the proper actions taken, how different one's life would have been. Because I'd have grieved as a 13-year-old. My father actually sent me away about 4 weeks after my mother died to stay with my godmother. I have no idea why, except I think he perhaps needed to grieve. But then he realized he'd made a huge mistake, and I was called back and taken back into the home, or maybe he just wasn't getting his shoes cleaned. I don't know. That's me being the cynical me. But I know he regretted doing that. I know that he regretted sending me away. I think he thought he could cope better on his own. But for whatever reason, we were our mutual support over those months afterwards until he found Joan. And my father was the sort of person that even if Joan had died, he needed a woman. He was not good on his own. And so I think from that perspective, for him, it really worked out well. My stepmother was a wonderful person, fantastic person to me. She was also very good for him because she would only take so much and then she'd put her foot down, which was something my mother never put her foot down. And so he knew when he'd stepped over the boundary. And it was a good thing for him to learn that there was a boundary and he couldn't step over it without wrath as a result. So to all the people who experience bereavement, really at any age, but certainly as a young child, certainly as a young girl, who 13 is a tricky age anyway, you know, blossoming into early womanhood, hormones and all that sort of thing running riot. I guess it's probably a good thing that I let the grief come out eventually, because it has opened doors to me. I'm involved in motivational speaking. I'm an advocate for young children facing child abuse. That's another story. And it wasn't my father. I'm developing into the person I always was, but never knew it. So if you're a child, or if you're a parent of a child who loses the other parent, please give time and support to the child. They say that children can help adults get through bereavement, but I think it's an overlooked thing that the child really, really needs a lot of love and support as well. There are organizations now that can help with this. When I was 13, there may have been organizations, but my father would have been the last person to ever approach anybody about asking for help. So you need to take the time with a young child. Everybody copes with grief in a different way. And, you know, no answer fits all. So hopefully you know the child well enough and how the child works to be able to be the person that they really need at that time, rather than just letting them battle on almost as if it hadn't happened. I've only got a few minutes left, but I'll just tell you a very brief story. I went to a grammar school in Nottingham, and it was a very good academic school. It was in a mining area, and I have never sounded as if I had an accent from that particular town, city, Nottingham. So I always spoke with a funny accent, or I thought they spoke with a funny accent, but apparently it was me. And I used to get bullied at this school because of the way I spoke. And an English teacher once said, "What's the definition of a snob?" And they said, "Oh, Sue Morris, because she talks all posh." And the student teacher said, "Yes, that's right." I'll never forget that. Anyway, I have to say that after I went back to school, after the funeral, 1 week later, those kids were the best kids that I could ever have had. They were my rocks. They were so supportive of me. So people can get their help, not just from a very close family friend or a relative, but from their cohorts at school. So support is not a one-banded thing, it's a many-banded thing. So I thought today I would share that story with you. Death is hard for everybody to cope with, and this was completely unexpected. No hospital stays, for the previous 5 years, nothing. And it really, in that case, it was almost shock more than reality. But if you're ever in a position to help somebody who is in the middle of grieving the loss of a close family member, please talk to them. Don't ignore them. Please treat them normally. But please, please be there for them. They need to be able to talk to somebody when the time is right for them. Now, I don't usually do this. I don't usually go off topic. I love talking to guests and them telling their stories. But there are occasions when I think it's nice to go off the main sort of road and take time to share a very personal story to me. She was wonderful. I see no wrong in her. I'm sure there was, but at 13, she was my best friend. And she looked after me so, so well. So spend time respect and love those that you've lost. But remember that they did so much good when they were alive. And remember the good times. I remember my mother with love and joy every single day. I remember my father with love and joy now. That took a bit more work, I have to tell you. Anyway, here I am going to close because we're almost out of time. I hope you've enjoyed my story. I hope that for those that need some help and inspiration in this challenge, that my words have made a contribution to what you need. If you have any questions or comments, or would like to know more about a guest on our show, that includes me as well, please contact me at overtheedgesue@gmail.com. Now, Over the Edge looks really strange because it's got 2 E's in the middle, but it's right, it's fine. And one thing I say to everybody, and this is really true because most people would not have known, please do not judge others unless you can walk in their shoes, for you have no idea what has brought them to the place they're now in. Let's all treat everybody with respect because you don't know what they're going through or what they've been through. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful week.